Good morning. It is 11:48 a.m. on Sunday, December 3rd, 2017. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. Today is Sunday, which means it is time to continue my rewatch of Ghost in the Shell standalone complex with season 1, the only season we're going to do, episode 5, The Inviting Bird Will Chant, Decoy. Which is a very complicated episode because the intent of this episode, it is one of the complex episodes continuing from last week. Uh, it's very complicated, but in some ways it's trying to be overcomplicated on purpose because this is the part of the story arc where it's like something funny's going on. Whoa, wait, something really strange is going on. Wait, what's going on? And having everybody, including our protagonists, be really confused by the mystery at this point, but having it escalate in terms of how serious it seems to be. And so a lot of stuff happens. um, but, you know, you just kind of have to understand at this point that it's okay to not necessarily catch everything that's going on or to understand exactly what's going on. But um, basically, we start off. Uh, Aramaki, the chief of Section 9, is meeting with a sort of a ugly-looking guy who is we're told, is the Minister of Home Affairs, and he is talking to Aramaki. They are talking about the threat to Police Superintendent General Dido. Um, that was at the end of the last one. If you don't remember, that was the bit where the laughing man appears to have resurfaced because in the middle of his speech, where he was basically trying to pin this whole interceptor incident on one guy, all of a sudden one of his colleagues stood up. The laughing man logo appeared over his face, and he threatened the superintendent's life. So they're talking about this and how this is really bad because this super famous hacker that we never caught, that did a whole bunch of stuff before and we never caught it, is now threatening high level political figures, and we don't seem to know how to do anything about it. That's really bad. It's bad not only for the physical danger to perhaps to this one guy, but also just in the sense of public confidence that they can get things done. And so they're trying to figure out what to do. But we get then a briefing of well, first we get a fun little sequence where Bato and the Major are in the car with Aramaki, and they're just asking, it's like, so is this going to be another operation where we have to just sit in the background and watch the police, trample over everything? And Aramaki basically says, no, I'm going to make you work really hard on this one. And even though that means essentially re-interviewing all the same people that the police already have, and kind of going back over another investigation. And we get a briefing where the primary suspect that they're going to be interviewing appears to be a guy named Nanao A. And my understanding is that that's just a Japanese surname that is pronounced A. It's not the letter A. But I guess that doesn't really matter. But supposedly this guy has all of this evidence to support the idea that he's sort of a left-leaning terrorist type who hid his activist past, and then got a high-level job with Serrano Genomics, which is again the technology company that was at the center of the original Laughing Man incident, which we're going to learn more about. But they basically talk about how there's so much evidence suggesting that it's this guy that's kind of fishy. And but Bato actually says, like, he's rolled and battered and deep fried in guilt, so much so that it's obvious he's innocent. But they don't know that for sure. It's a hunch. So they're still going to investigate him to try to see first if they can, like figure out, well, what is going on with this guy, and maybe that will lead us to whoever's really doing it. And then, in the off chance that he really is the guy, then we just catch him. But there's also a little bit, they want to know. It's like, okay, well, why is this their primary suspect when it seems easy for us to say that he's not actually the guy? So we have Bato and Togasa who are supposed to stake out the guy himself personally. And then the rest of the team are supposed to be trying to investigate the trail of like who is setting this guy up to be the decoy in the title. And one of the interesting things that takes a little bit to play out and is not obvious, it might be easy to miss details of, especially watching the first time, is that we have several members of the team investigating and speaking with various people about this guy, and people who knew Nanao A, and it's like, well, what was he like? And especially as we get it summed up later, we have people insisting that they knew the guy well and that they're sure they're talking about the right guy, identifying him in a photo and everything, but they're describing very different sorts of people. And there's the question of like, is it different personalities, or is it possible, and given the skill of the hacker involved in this case, is it possible that each of them are actually describing memories of different people that they have been hacked to believe they're talking about Nanao A? And so they begin to suspect that someone has hacked into the brains of all of these witnesses to make them identify Nanao A as the guy that's most likely to have done this. And in the meantime, we have Bato and Togasa watching Nanao's apartment. And this is another bit that's a little bit confusing later. But he seems to, their target seems to just be sitting at some computers and sending short emails that have no viruses. And he's just doing that all day. And in fact, they have police agents in the very next unit next to the guy listening to him through the wall, while Bato and Togasa are across the street with a camera. And so that seems to be all that's happening there. And here's where we finally get the Major to help us refresh what was the original Laughing Man incident that they've mentioned. And it's a nice excuse to show it to us. We heard just basically saying, I was out of the country when it originally happened, so although I heard about it, I didn't really watch any of the media firsthand. So we get some nice sort of flavor for Motoko Kusanagi, the Major, in the sense that where she goes when she kind of wants to be away from her job stuff is we see her basically lounging in a little apartment with a couple of other scantily dressed girls who seem to be excited to see her, but disappointed that she's there. She's just going to plug into a computer the whole time. So the Major promises to make it up to them. And, it's not made explicit here, but the implication is that they're more than just friends, or maybe they're just friends with benefits. But there's definitely, two girls living there that are excited to see Motoko, but disappointed that Motoko is just working. So that's some interesting little backstory flavor, additional context for who the Major is. But when she watches the incident and learns more about what actually originally happened, it's some interesting stuff. Because first we learn that the head of Serrano Genomics, which is this company that we've talked about, that they make nanomachines, micromachines, that are used for all sorts of things, including like healthcare. Luna is barking at something. Luna! I don't know what she's barking at. Anyway, but she, yeah, I don't know how well you can hear it, but it's really distracting here. Luna, come! Good girl. Good girl. Okay, sorry about that. So, the CEO of Serrano Genomics had so many people close to him got hacked to deliver him warnings that he needs to come clean about some mysterious wrongdoing, or else, he'll be in trouble. And he doesn't listen to those warnings, and then he is eventually kidnapped himself. And apparently, 2 days after being kidnapped is the incident that everybody knows about, where in the middle of a TV broadcast weather report, sort of reporter on the street sort of thing, all of a sudden in the middle of this crowd, a guy wearing a big hooded jacket and a bandana covering his face marches this CEO into the square at gunpoint and is essentially shouting at him, "You need to come clean. You tell everybody what you did." And the CEO kind of doesn't, kind of just says, well, why don't you tell him? And the implication is like, well, no, you need to do it. And it, whatever the intent must have been at that time, seems like it did not go the way the laughing man wanted, because he didn't get any kind of confession and eventually was forced to just flee. And as he fled, his coat's kind of hood came up, but nobody saw his face. They just saw that logo. And so it's that interesting thing that we saw in the last one, where not only did every single TV camera broadcasting see only the logo, but even the people physically present only saw the logo. And even some of them thought they saw his face, but then when they described it for a sketch artist, they described the logo. And supposedly the only two people to see his real face and not the logo were two homeless people who had no cybernetic implants. So the idea that this guy could hack all of those people and all of those cameras live is hacking of incredible skill. And yet it's all a little bit strange, because someone who could do that, why are they marching the guy at gunpoint into a big crowd and then failing to get the confession they want? Well, I mean, it just seems kind of like a sloppy operation for someone of that skill. And further, after that whole incident, what the tactics seem to change again. Instead of warning or demanding this accountability, they instead inject a virus in Serrano Genomics' micromachines, and essentially the blackmail was sent, essentially, saying, you need to come clean, or rather, pay us, or we'll keep this virus and ruin all your machines. And then once that news got out and the stock price fell, the demand stopped. And the major says it's like almost as if that was the actual point. And then goes on to do that for these other micro machine manufacturers, doing essentially the same thing, demanding blackmail and making their stock price fall. And it starts being like, well, okay, now what does the guy want? This seems like it's all over the place. And then nothing, just disappears. So this is definitely a mystery case. We can understand why they've had so much trouble, because this guy is obviously super skilled, but seems like what he wants and what he tries to do with those skills is kind of all over the place. So they have no idea. But on a hunch, the major speaks to Aramaki, the chief, and says essentially, I want to stop following this so-called suspect and start following the police superintendent instead, because I think we have the wrong guy, and I think someone's going to really attack him. And so when I say on a hunch, I should note that she does say her ghost whispered it to her, because that's obviously relevant to the title of the show, Ghost in the Shell. This idea that, even someone who has a fully cybernetic body, do you still have a ghost, a soul in that shell, that whole sort of thing. So for her to say that it's her ghost whispering to her, as to describe this hunch. So we see her show up at this fancy building where the police superintendent's going to give a speech so that she can basically try to be there in case something happens. In the meantime, now we go back to where Bato and Togasa are observing this guy, this suspect, and I'm trying to recall. Right, and so this is where the point in the episode where Ishikawa, this is the bearded guy who stays behind in this chair, he's kind of the information analysis specialist. He's the guy that kind of puts together this idea that all of the people they interviewed seem like they're describing different people, even though they all say it's this one guy. So something seems fishy there, like maybe someone gave them all false memories to report as being this guy. So Aramaki says, okay, that's fishy enough that we want to talk to the real guy now. So let's get him, bring him in. And here's where we get a really strange reveal, which is this idea that both Bato and Togasa and the police were monitoring this one specific apartment and saw on cameras, there's the guy, he's in there. But then when they break, and we've seen the guy at the laptop, and everything seems in order. But something's originally very fishy, because when they break into that apartment to arrest him, all of a sudden it looks different than where we've been seeing him or what they've been seeing through the camera. And we realize he has essentially hacked something about what they were doing, whether it was their technology or their own brains or something, to make them think he was in there when he really wasn't. So all they find is a big bank of computers and a sex doll. And they realize, too, that he is monitoring them back through this technology. And what we get from him in the little bit that he's talking about definitely clues us in that there's more to this guy, because essentially it sounds like what he wants is for people to think he's the laughing man, but saying that in a way specifically like he's not, but he wants people to think he is. In any event, we get a cliffhanger ending where he is transmitting what is described as a modular delayed action virus, and we don't know what for. So cliffhanger ending, and so we'll continue that thread next week on episode 6, which, as I recall, is called The Copycat Will Dance Meme, which is the third in a little series of complex episodes, and then we have another couple of standalone episodes, I think. But that's where we stand right now, and so a lot of complicated stuff going on. What's happening? We don't know, but we're introducing the mystery proper now for the season. So I think I'll just go ahead and leave it there. We're not supposed to know understand what's going on at this point. It's supposed to be confusing. So yeah, we'll leave it there, and I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.